So this is my review of the Beolit 17. 17 because they're named by the year they were produced. So we had the Beolit 12 and the Beolit 15. So I haven't purchased the others. I've only heard this one in person, and to cut a long story short, really like this speaker. Now, the last couple of speakers I had were the Denon 250s. I did say, yes, it's a good speaker. It's clearly one of the top speakers in its class. People said, I didn't say that. I absolutely did say that. But doesn't mean to say it's absolutely for my taste. And the problem I had with it was how it handled vocals. Now, in many ways, the Beolit 17 is very similar sound signature. So it's a muscular sound. It's a full-bodied sound. The 17 is even warmer. I'm not saying they are that comparable, but you like the signature of the Denon 250s, you will probably like this as an even more mature, grown-up version of it. It's very warm, it's very bass heavy. But what I didn't like about the 250s was that, as far as I'm concerned, it didn't handle vocals very well. Not the way I like them. I like my vocals out front. That's really important, that the vocals stand out. That's kind of what I listen for. And whereas the Denon 250s, they didn't stand out. And I'm comparing it because two Denon 50s is about 300 quid. This is about 400 quid. I think they're comparable. This is really good with vocals. I'm not saying it's the last word in accuracy, but if you like a warm, full-bodied sound signature, I think you're going to really like this speaker. It is pretty awesome in many ways. It's not the most relaxing speaker. It's not the most accurate speaker in terms, if you are an audiophile, it's got to sound like the original. It probably won't quite sound, this is going to sound a bit more bass heavy, but it's not a coloured kind of bass. It's just that the mids are not quite up there with the bass. So it doesn't sound over boosted, it sounds low. And the specs say 37 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz, and it really does go that low. It's great, but it's not an overwhelming bass. Yes, if you're going to listen to it hours and hours, it may be a bit much if you're looking for something relaxing. But it doesn't sound obviously boosted. It sounds warm and round, but not sharp. So it may be on the slow side for a bass, but it's a bass that I particularly like. The long story short is I really like the speaker. Bear in mind the price range. Just to give you, before I go over the specs and tell you how what it's like to live with, I'm just going to give you a quick feel of the speaker. I'm going to play a few quick 30-second clips to give you a feel of the speaker. Then I'm going to just give you a quick maybe a long-winded overview, and then I'm going to do the sound clip comparisons. Now, I don't have anything to really compare this with, and we'll get to it later, but I do have some comparisons that will be a reference point. So Beolit make a big play of the fact it's designed by Cecily Mans, who is a Danish, well, according to Wikipedia, is a Danish designer of high repute, but I think most of her work seems to be furnishings. So it's not the electronic side of things, it's the looks, the aesthetics of the speaker. Now, as you can see, it's basically, you know, two bricks piled on top of each other. So, you know, what are the design aspects? Well, first of all, the handle, it is not on two facing sides, it comes at an angle. Now, I don't know if that's by design. I find that a little bit awkward. It's not a huge deal. It swings, but it kind of hits your leg if you're used to having a handle a long way around. Maybe they've done that so it doesn't hide all the controls on the top. Say this is an anodized, pearl blasted grill. The rest of it actually feels a little bit plastic, but they say it's some special polymer which will really stand up to wear and tear. What they don't say is that it's in any way watertight or splash proof. So you know, paying Cecily all that money, but we don't actually have anything that's IP rated. I don't know. It comes in all of two colours: stone grey, which is the lighter one, and a darker grey, which they call natural. Both pretty bland, really. There's nothing jazzy about it. It's kind of, I guess the whole idea of the design behind it is understated, minimalist. But maybe they've gone a little bit far, because people do like a bit of character in the speakers. But anyway, the main thing is it does sound good. It's 2.6 kilograms, 5.7 pounds. So it's not light, but it's not particularly heavy. If you're particularly weak, you may struggle taking this portable. You know, to me, it's fine. I don't have a problem with this. Look, it's not a JBL, you know, cylindrical shape, which is, you know, easy to put in the hand and you can just chuck in a bag. This is a step up, but you're getting something more for that money. You're getting bigger drivers for a start. It is a big sound. Probably makes more sense having a squarish kind of box in terms of, you know, air inside for the drivers. Now, the actual technical specs. So they say 2 times 120 watts peak power. See, that's not RMS. The actual amplifiers are 235 watt class amplifiers, D class being pulse as opposed to linear. And so RMS is basically 70 watts. It's not the 240 watts, which, you know, it's going to give maybe a second for a peak. I don't know, but that's what the headlines say, 240 watts. And talking about headlines, looking at the reviews, what most people don't like about this speaker, it's all about the battery life, because they advertise it as 24 hours battery life. Now, if you actually look in the small print, they actually say playback at moderate listening level, volume step 14 of 32. This seems to be what most people are not happy about, because they're saying headlines, this is 24 hours. Now, if you read around, it does seem that if you're having it anywhere between 60 and 100% volume, you're going to get between 2 and 6 hours, depending on what kind of music, how long it's paused, how long the gaps are between. But anyway, I played Rita Ora Anywhere. I do like the song, but anyway, played it on repeat, and I played this on 73% volume. I got 4 hours 10 minutes, and it shut itself off. Then reconnected it, I got another 10 minutes. So a total of 4 hours 20, and then you've had it. It doesn't go like in a linear fashion from starting off on full volume, or the 73% volume I had it on, and then dropping off as the battery goes. There was one clear drop. After 1 hours 35 minutes, it dropped from the 73%, so that maximum volume that I had on, 73% volume, it dropped by 9 decibels, and then played at that lower volume, which is still reasonably loud, but not the full volume that I had it set to, and then played that all the way through till it actually cut off. So there seems to be a clear point at which there's some sort of power saving feature goes in, but it's not linear, so it doesn't gradually lose volume. It cut off after 1 hour 35 minutes. When I say cut off, it reduced volume, 9 decibels, and then played all the way through for to the end of the 4 hours 10 minutes. So that's what I actually got. Quite honestly, 70% may be, you know, for me, a decent listening volume. 4 hours plus, I don't have a problem with that for the sounds you're getting. You know, I think if they didn't advertise it as 24 hours battery life, some people wouldn't be as unhappy with it as they are. By the way, the handle is actually real leather, it's not fake. So I'm going to play some sound clips. This just shows you how the actual sound changes as you go through the volume steps. So I've got a 23%, a 43%, I think 73%, and 100%. Now they're normalized, so the volume is the same across them. And basically, I'm just going to go through exactly how the different volume affects the sound. So just a quick look to see exactly what happens as you go up the volume steps. 23%, 46%. It's almost no difference. It's really linear. There's no massive change in the sound curve. You hit 73% and it does start to reduce the bass a little bit. It still sounds pretty massive, as you can see. So you're talking about a couple of decibels there. And relative to that, the mids and highs are being pushed. And quite honestly, I quite like it at 73%, around that sort of mark. It sounds absolutely fantastic. The vocals hang out there in front. The bass is big, huge and deep. It sounds great. 100% is still a huge bass. Yep, it's come off again. You've lost another 3 decibels, as you would expect. But the sound is still massive. The bass is still massive. It's just, being reduced relative to the lower volumes. And the highs and the mids are getting pushed relative to the bass, and quite honestly, I quite like the way it fills out the sound. So other than right at the low volume where the bass is so deep and big, it does overwhelm the rest of the music. So it kind of sounds dull, and it's not a great speaker if you're going to listen at low volumes a lot, but it's not trying to process the sound too much. It's pretty linear all the way through, so it's not processing it to really adjust for those mids and highs and make it sound linear all the way through. It sounds as it should be. If you don't want lots of processing, pretty linear all the way through, and just the obvious coming off of the bass as you get to the very high volumes. But it sounds together all the way through, other than I would say at these low volumes like 23, 25% and below, where what you are really hearing is the bass, and it's big, it's real. It doesn't sound boosted. It just sounds like the rest of the music is recessed. At no point, even though it's big and huge, bigger than a lot of the bass on speakers I've heard, at this size, it doesn't sound like it's an obvious boost because it's deep and it's round and it's big and it's warm. I really love this speaker. So I do have to quickly just point out, in terms of accuracy of the speaker and its peculiarities, its own sound signature, and let's face it, almost all speakers have their own sound signature. Very rare to find something that is truly flat, and if it is, you may be a little bit boring. However, here we have the original track, so you can see quite a linear dip all the way down to the high end, reasonable big bass around 48 Hertz as the peak. Now, as we go through the Beolit 17's range, you can see straight away it's warm. It's definitely tuned to sound obviously bass heavy. The mids and the highs are lacking even compared to the original track. You can see that this is how, you know, it's tuned that way. It's pretty obvious. And consistently, it does have this dip at around 6,000 Hertz and a couple of peaks either side of that at around 3,000 Hertz and about 12,000 Hertz. Now, 12,000 Hertz, coincidentally, would be where they say if you give it a boost, it makes it sound more hi-fi at around 12,000 Hertz, which is what they would call the brilliance end of the spectrum, but can be a little bit piercing on the ears. But I guess it's here to make it sound a little bit more defined than perhaps it really is. The boost at 3,000 would coincide with the upper mids, so they're kind of making up for the lack of mid-range to give more emphasis to that bass, and you can see they're trying to make up for it a little bit, I presume, with those couple of peaks. But however, in terms of accuracy, yeah, it's not the most accurate, but however, I can say on a listen, it's very pleasing. There's no obvious lack of detail. It doesn't sound obviously coloured or uncoloured in any way, but it has to be said, if you're looking for the most accurate of speakers, this isn't going to be it. However, I found it a very nice, pleasurable, relaxing, to a certain extent, listen. So I just have to point out that and this dip is nothing to do with the way I'm recording. This is consistent to this speaker, and it doesn't appear when I record other speakers. And quite honestly, you kind of hear that signature anyway when you're listening. So I'm just pointing out, you know, it's not the most accurate. However, you know, all these speakers come with their own sound signature, and this tells you what you're going to get with the Beolit 17. It's going to sound very warm, does have a genuinely big, deep bass, and they've made up for some of that lack of definition by boosting particular areas of the high. I mean, that 12,000 kilohertz is where, if you read up, they say boost it to make it sound a bit more hi-fi. So it's clearly been tuned that way. So that's the thing with this. Is not a low volume speaker. And that was one of the other complaints people said, and I have to agree, because the bass, you know, there's no adjustment for the bass across volume. It's just ever present. Because, you know, the mids are a little bit lacking in terms of actual accuracy. It does sound dull, say below the 25%. So it's not a low listening speaker, but it is great as you go up the volume steps. And it's not that the bass is mudging the vocals in any way, which is a particular issue for me. And that's what I love about this speaker, that it is genuinely deep without being obviously boosted. It does go, it's spec down to 37 Hertz, and it really does sound, and the graphs show it does go down that low, maybe even a bit lower, depending on what you call the actual cutoff. But the vocals hang out front. It always sounds together. I really like it. Just that you can't, it's not a speaker. You don't pay that money to play this at low volumes. So in terms of the specs again, battery is 2,200 milliamp hours, 7.4 volts. It has USB-C charging. But here's another issue. So you do get the USB-C input, and you can charge your phone or anything else that you want from it. However, although it's capable of 3 amps, if you charge your phone, you're going to charge at the rate of half an amp. So it's for emergency use, really. Now, charging. So they say charge from 0 to 100, 2.5 hours. Now, the charger it comes with is a 3 amp charger capable of 45 watts. Charged it from when it was the battery was absolutely exhausted. It was charging it was pulling 10 watts from the charger. Its most exhausted state, it's not charging at its full capacity that it could possibly do with that charger at 45 watts. It's a slow, obviously safe charge. It's starting off pulling 10 watts, which would equate really to, if it's assuming 5 volts, about 2 amps rather than 3 amps. However, as it becomes charged and you're heading towards a fully charged state, it starts dropping off, and so it's trickle charging. So it's being careful with the battery. It's extending the battery life, but what you're not getting is the ability to quick charge that full. You know, if you could pull 15 volts, which is the charger is capable of at 3 amps, but it's actually even below the 5 volt 3 amp that you might expect. It's 10 watts, it seems to be 2 amps, 5 volts, I assume. Something else people are talking about is that even when your battery is exhausted and you want to plug it into the mains, it won't play at full volume. Try this out. As I was trying to play it at various states of the battery, from 0 all the way up to 100. So if I was charging at 10 watts and then I started wanting to play it, I'm only getting like 13, 15 watts out of it. So it's still, you're not, no way you're going to play full volume because it's a 70 watt rated amplifiers in there. And as you go up through the battery states, as it's more and more charged, it does pull more and more of that power. But even at near full power, I was only getting like 35 watts out of it. In theory, you may get your 45 watts out of it, but it's almost pointless in that you only get that much power when the battery's basically fully charged anyway. The lower the amount of charge left in the battery, you're hardly getting anything out of the mains charger. Oh, that would explain why you've exhausted your battery, you put it on the mains and it still doesn't go that loud. Well, because it's not pulling enough power. I've seen some places say this is NFC enabled. Well, it isn't unless they've hidden it somewhere. There's no NFC on this. It's just normal Bluetooth pairing. On the back you do get your 3.5mm auxiliary input, and you've also got this tiny battery indicator. The only time, if it was any use anyway, the only time you get a warning without using the app, the only time you're going to know that the battery is low is when that light starts coming on. It'll go red, and that means you've got 15% left. At 10% left, it'd be flashing, but it's almost of no consequence, isn't it? You've got to go right behind it to see it, and it's a tiny thing. Find it alone if it's at night, but during the day it's not that easy to see. But anyway, the point really being is that you have to use this really in conjunction with the app. To get most out of the speaker, you need to use it with the app. I had some problems with it, which it wasn't consistent. At first I couldn't, on my Android, on my Note 4, I couldn't connect at all at first. Now I did find that, and I must say on some of my other devices and some even older Android devices, I didn't have a problem. It's only on my Note 4, and it may be my phone, specific to my phone, but I could connect to it fine if I hadn't played any music. So I connect to it by Bluetooth. I can go into the app, but as soon as I start playing music, I can't connect to it anymore after that. So any settings I need to do, if I'm using that phone, by the way, if you have the same problem, don't play any music, try it before you've played any music, and you may well get into the app. Also, by the way, when I was charging, so the only indication of how much charge it's actually got in while you're charging is if it's orange or green. Orange means it's charging, green means it's fully charged. And by the way, it went green before it was fully charged, although it was down to a very low, trickle charge state. So green doesn't absolutely mean 100% full, but I suppose it's probably like 95% full. But there's not, it's minimalistic. I guess this is all down to Cecily Mann's. I don't know, but that's what we've got. However, there's a difference between living with it and liking the sound. I certainly like the sound, which I will get to. In terms of the Bluetooth, you can simultaneously connect to two different devices and have instant switching. So you can have two devices. One will be playing. You hit play on the other device, it will instantly start playing from the other device. So that was quite handy. I mean, it is instant switching between two devices, but no more than two. I don't know what the maximum memory is in here, but I certainly couldn't connect to it with more than two devices at the same time. In terms of the actual drivers and what is giving you the sound. So you have a full range driver on the front. Now there's variously called long stroke wideband woofer and the full range driver. Long stroke as in this comes out further, so it means you can have a more compact driver basically. It's a full range driver basically. It's 5.5 inches. That is on the front. Then you've got your two tweeters pointing at an angle on the side. You've got your two, by the way, the tweeters are 1.5 inches. You've then got two 4-inch passive radiators on the side, and then you've got another tweeter, I think it's there on the side, on the back, so this is what they call 300-degree sound, and you can certainly hear it from all sides. It's different sound though, and I will get to some clips where I'll just show you what it sounds like from each side. It's a decent sound all round, but this idea of true, I mean, they've each gone further than saying 360-degree sound. They're saying it's true 360-degree sound. So It is, but it doesn't sound like it does when you're front on. So as I said, I have recorded from the front, the side, the back, just so you hear what it sounds like from each side. Now, this will exaggerate the differences because I've recorded it close up to the speaker. Obviously, you're walking around, they will merge into sounding a little bit more similar. But it does show you how very different each side is. True 360 sound, you can hear it from 360 degrees, but it's going to sound a bit different. It's still always going to sound better front on. So this is just how it does sound from each side. These tweeters, the way they're pointing out, it does give a wide sound. So this is another reason why I like this. I'd normally only buy in pairs. I'm not going to buy this price in pairs, but it never sounds boxy. So sometimes for me on a boxy speaker, you are constantly turning the volume up and kind of thinking, oh, it's going to break free of the speaker. And I do not like a boxy sound. I do not like it sounding confined. I do like it sounding like there's some sort of soundstage and it's wide. Although this is in many ways, well, it is mono because in the sense that you've got one full range driver, although you've got your tweeters on both sides, it does sound wide. Now, it's not going to sound wide as in stereo because it's not balanced for stereo, is it? But it does sound wide. I never have any issue of it sounding boxy. So that's another reason why I really, really like it, because it's a big sound, a wide sound, even though it's one speaker, and it's relatively compact. I know it's bigger than, something that's really small going in a handbag or something, but for what it is, it does sound wide, does sound warm. The actual controls on the speaker. So you've got a function button, which again, I'll get to soon. That's going to work in conjunction with the app, and you can pair it to certain features. Your Bluetooth button, volume up and down, your power button. Now, look, so the power button does light up, the Bluetooth button does light up, the others don't. It's hard to know exactly what you're doing. The function button particularly, other than there's a quick change in the light on the power button when you press the function button, it's hard to know where you are with the function button. Has it worked or not? In terms of if I like to tie it to my favorite equalizer setting, and as the equalizer is quite subtle, the changes, it's not always obvious what setting I've got it on without actually going back into the app anyway, which kind of defeats the whole point. So you can't really see these at night. The whole thing is grey. It's not great. It would be nice if they were a little bit bigger, if they all lit up, or you had a light somewhere else that indicated what you've pressed. You do get the tones when you turn it on, you can turn it off, but even turning it off is quite a long hold on the power button. Look, it's not great. I like the speaker, but I do have to point out what I think didn't have to be quite the nuisance that it is in use. Now, some people say they love this lip on the top because they can put their drinks or their phone on it or something. I don't know if that's by design, and yeah, I guess it's quite useful. It's a flat surface, but it's not a major thing for me why I would buy this speaker. At the end of the day, you're buying it because it's got a very particular sound signature. It's bass heavy, it's very warm. Without being boxy, it's good. By the way, people who've had both the 17 and the 15, and because one question might be, how does it compare with the 15? No, I haven't owned the 15. Going what it says on people various people are saying online, and not reviews, you know, people have actually used the speaker, but the 17 sounds more balanced. It has a punchier bass, and one of the issues with the 15 was that the treble is quite bright, sibilant, sizzling as they call it, and it's less so on the 17, which will also lend it to sounding a little bit more warm. So they do have a different sound signature. Some people prefer the 15 over the 17 and vice versa. It's going to come down to what you actually want. And of course you can get the 15 quite cheap second hand now. However, I do like this one, and from what I've heard of the 15 online, this is the one I prefer. Similarly with the Vifar Oslo, which from all accounts I nearly bought one, which I didn't because by people describing it as boxy, which I really do not like, and that wouldn't have worked for me. But also this isn't boxy. The bass goes deeper, and has more of a punch, whereas on the Oslo, from what I gather, it's a very thick bass, but doesn't go as low as the Beolit 17. Now, I don't have anything to really reference it by here. I don't have a whole collection. I buy speakers, I sell them off, I get another one. So I'm not buying speakers in for review and keeping them for reference. I'm buying speakers in that that I want to review, and I do want to put my opinion out there because it's different from a lot of people's other opinions, but still, it's my honest opinion, and that's for me what counts. So I don't really have anything in that class to reference it with, other than my JBL Charge 3s and my Sony SRS X77, which a lot of people are hating on, and that's fine, but I like it, and that's fine for me. The point is, certainly the Charge 3s, people really most people who are interested in Bluetooth speakers will have a handle on, and it will give them a reference point. So in no way am I saying I prefer Charge 3s or any other speaker to this, and I'm not saying it's comparable. I'm making that clear. This is a reference point, so you get some idea, because obviously you don't know no matter what kind of recording I put, and I don't know, these are not binaural recordings, these are straight recordings, but however you record it, it's never going to sound the same as it actually sounds in your room, and that's the point. So this is my reference point against the Charge 3, against the Sony. Now the Sony isn't a cheap speaker. Well, it wasn't when it was new, so it's kind of comparable, not quite. And these are again normalized, playing at about 70% volume, but normalized, so the volumes are the same. You clearly hear the differences in the sound. So now we get the all-important, how loud does it go? It goes loud. As loud as any speaker, any portable speaker that I've had. It's impressive. And, you know, although obviously there is some bass reduction at very, very high volumes, it still sounds good all the way through to my ears. So this sound clip is relative. So I'll start off at loudest with the Beolit 17 and then play the Sony and the Charge 3 and 2 Charge 3s as well together, just so you hear how much louder this actually goes and how much better it sounds at full volume, not just that it goes louder. So, as I said, this really has to work in conjunction with the app, maybe more so than any other speaker I've personally tried. So this is a quick overview of the app. So this is the B&O Play app. Just click on your speaker to get into your app. The first icon is just telling you what speaker is now active. If you was to add a second speaker, you'd click on the two devices icon, add your second speaker. You can choose between party and stereo mode. If you want to set the function button on the speaker, you can go into the function set icon. You can choose between remote, which just means the function button becomes a play and pause button. You can choose an alarm, so you can use the app to set a time to wake you up or wake you up with a particular song, or the last song you played, I believe. I haven't used it. You can set the function button to play your favorite saved equalizer setting, which is the tone touch option. You can choose the function button to play the last played song, or in fact you can choose it to do nothing. Now I did set it up to try and have it playing my favorite equalizer setting. I found it hit and miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and I ended up not using it. You can set your favorite equalizer setting there. Of course, you don't have to have a saved setting. If you leave it on a particular setting and it's automatically embedded into the speaker, you only have to save one if you want it to be recalled later by the function button, or indeed if you want to recall saved presets. And you can use the app for simple functions of your music player. The app is also the best indication of your power level. So the speaker will only tell you when it's gone below 15%, and that's if you turn it around, look at the tiny LED at the back. On here you can see it's got the icon for battery, which is telling me at the moment it's fully charged. So the important thing, the big thing, one of the big things about the app is the fact you can embed your own personal settings. Now what you can't do is use a decent 9-band graphic equalizer and embed a really customized sound. You have to go by, you know, what they've engineered in terms of sound and what does each section on this, I have to say, to me, non-intuitive equalizer, depending on where you put it in a square and where you put it in the circle. And by the way, I understand on my clip the circle isn't exactly lining up with the dots. It's because I was trying to exaggerate exactly what I meant by halfway up and full up. I do understand that really it's about those central three circles, so don't read too much into that, but basically this does show you generally what happens in each section and just how it affects the sound. And by the way, I have to point out I had a calamity with the audio on this. It's not good, it's not great. My original recordings were corrupted after a crash, and I just haven't got time to redo it, quite honestly. So it's not terrible, but it's not good, I know. So to see what the settings in the app actually do, I've used this track by Electronomania called United, because it's pretty strong right through the frequency range with a nice dollop of bass. So leaving the app on its default setting, the little circle in the middle, this is the frequency graph. If you expand that central spot to its maximum, what you find is it's a little bit more dynamic. The bass gets a bit of a boost, the lower mids are increased, and the highs slightly boosted. So overall, a bit more dynamic. So looking at how each of the 4 sections actually affects the music, just to get a feel of what each one is doing. So if I take the circle up halfway on each of the 4 sections, for instance, if I take it halfway up on the warm side, what you get is an obvious bass boost. If I take it over to the excited section, what I'm getting is a small bit of bass reduction, and I'm getting the highs increased. Going over to the relaxed section, I'm getting lower mids boosted, I'm getting the higher end reduced. I take it over to the bright side, the mids are reduced, the highs are increased, and upper bass is a little bit down. If I just leave it going straight up or straight down, so it's going across the 2 sections at a time, going 1/3 of the way up to warm excited, I'm getting a bass increase. If I take it up to 60% of the way up, I'm getting a bit more of a mids pushed. So it's not a linear change. I find it a little bit quirky, although it's obvious what each section is kind of doing. It's not obvious what it does depending on how far into a section you go. If I come down south of that central default spot, relaxed and bright third of the way down, I find the mids are pushed relative to the bass. Tiny bit of high-end reduction. Taking it down a little bit more, 60% of the way down. The mids and the highs slightly reduced relative to the 30%. So it's kind of backing off a little bit from what it had done in the first place. So if you do the same thing and I compare each section, if I go halfway up or all the way up, so going halfway up on the warm side, so while the bass was boosted for halfway up, I found going all the way up to top, the bass came down a little bit, while the upper mids and highs came up a bit, so it kind of backed off what it had done in the first place. In the bright section, I came up to 50%, the mids were reduced, the highs were increased, 100%, tiny bit of bass reduction, mids increased a bit more, but the high end backed off a little bit. You know, it's all very subtle, but still a bit counterintuitive to what I was expecting. Going along to the relaxed section, going halfway up with the little circle. The lower mids slightly pushed, the upper mids are slightly reduced, the high end slightly down. 100%. The bass reduced. It's going 20 decibels, 21 decibels, minus 21. So a bit of bass reduction. Upper mids increased, highs increased. So it's not, you're not getting linear changes as you go along the sections. Especially here when halfway I've got a high-end reduction, but then increased at 100%. You can see the highs going about 2 decibel higher. And then you get the excited section. So pushing it halfway, bass slightly reduced, high end increased, push it 100%, the mids and highs slightly reduced. So it's not what you expect. So generally you can say the warm side is a bass boost and some high end reduction. The excited section is a small bass reduction, a high end increase. The relaxed section, mids pushed, high end reduced. The bright section, the upper bass is reduced, mids come down, high end is up. So, I mean, having a quick go and trying to find what actually suited me. So for me personally, I preferred the mids pushed. I preferred having the spot at its normal size in the relaxed section, maybe a third of the way down and a third of the way across. Somewhere between that and a halfway, makes the sound somewhat fuller. There is a tiny bit of high-end reduction, which I preferred not to have. If I had a proper graphic equalizer on this, I could have controlled that, but you don't. But the mids are filled out comparative to the bass, and the high ends are slightly reduced. I preferred that sound signature. It sounded fuller and more complete to me. Just to show you quickly what happens if you actually expand that spot. It does change the sound. You get even more of a mids push, but it becomes a bit unnatural, and a bit high end is slightly very high end. So again, enlarging the spot makes it a bit more dynamic, but not completely linear. So I preferred the normal size, somewhere around there in the relaxed section. I preferred that sound. I just preferred the fuller nature. That's just my own personal taste. So just a couple of other tidbits. You get a 2-year warranty. If you buy it from B&O themselves, you get to try it for 30 days. And you can use this in conjunction with the Echo Dot. So just to quickly go over basically what I've already said, it's a great speaker. It's not the last word in accuracy, if that's what you're looking for. But if you like a big, obvious bass that doesn't sound like it's been engineered that way, but still kind of sounds natural, but it's big, it's warm, it's deep, but it's not fast, it's not sharp, what I call genuinely warm, I think you're going to love this speaker. Now, the mids are not particularly detailed. They are a little bit behind the rest of how the sound hangs together. If that's a particular issue, you may not like it. I normally do like really lush, sweet mids, and you don't get that on this. However, because of the way it handles vocals, I particularly like the way the vocals hang out front from the music. together with that warm bass, to me, and the fact that it's not boxy, it's quite a wide sound, even though it's not real stereo, makes it, you know, quite special to me. It goes pretty loud. There's no obvious deterioration in the sound as you're going right up to maximum. The issues are, of course, with the battery life and them saying 24 hours, but quite honestly, 70% over 4 hours for me, I don't have an issue with. I think, to me, that's pretty good considering how loud it actually goes. So I give this a big thumbs up. This is my favorite speaker that I have heard as a Bluetooth portable speaker. Is it truly portable? So that's a matter of opinion. This is my favorite. I'm sure, you know, there are many speakers that to everybody else sounds better. I've not particularly heard them, and of course it's down to individual choice. But I think what I like also about this is going to sound good with almost any kind of music, because being warm, it's going to colour any particularly bright, poor recordings. So while I do like everybody else to sound kind of like the original, it's not the last word for me. It's got to be enjoyable. That's the last word for me. So I'm just going to wrap up the video and say I really, really like this speaker. You may not like it, but for my taste, and if you understand my taste from my past videos, you know exactly what you will get. I hope you got something out of this. Thanks for watching.
UK